Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Sunday with Jay Barsky. I'm your host, Jay Barsky. I'm happy that you are listening to this podcast. I'm happy that you are streaming this episode. I'm just happy in general because there's a lot that I want to talk about today, and I'm releasing this on January 1st for a reason to talk about setting goals or just goal setting. But before I get all into that, just get into the introduction, just a couple of updates about me. Want to update on some things that I've been working on, some things that I'm planning on this year. And I'm just very excited because there's a lot of stuff that I plan in my head that I want to manifest and speak into existence. And I want to start it all off on this podcast. So as I mentioned previously on a previous solo podcast December was kind of a hibernation month for me. I still went out to do just to knock out some reps, work on my material. I actually surprisingly started doing a little bit of dad jokes, which is something I never really saw done in stand up before. And just did a little practice run with it. Didn't think it would try it at an open mic, and it was fun. And it actually did work. So that was fun. Maybe it's something I'll explore a little bit later on, a craft that I'll explore later in the year or as time progresses. But that's for me. As for actually working on my craft, I hadn't got a chance to do any writing. I tried to push it out of me. It just didn't come out just yet. Maybe January will work, but I've just been focusing on just doing my reps, knocking out a couple of mics, still attending some shows, always just supporting all my friends and colleagues on their showcases, especially if I'm in between mics. I'll definitely try to catch a couple of shows of my friends that are performing. But I really want to try to focus more within. Usually when I step out to do a comedy or like just anything related, I am pretty much requires me socializing or just going out, socializing, meeting with people. And there's a lot of times that I just want to stay in, focus on myself, just be alone and just focus on myself, focus on my thoughts, just reflect on my experiences in life, some things that I'm still trying to overcome. And that's where that's where I usually get most creative, is because of that isolation away from people. And that's where I start creating things from within my mind. I have to get comfortable with my own thoughts in order to explore that creativity in me. I have to be comfortable with my own thoughts. So that means that there's going to be barriers that are bothering me in my past that are kind of preventing me in order to be that creative. To stop that or prevent that or to overcome that is things just to meditate, or just when I talk about meditation, that these thoughts or negative thoughts are going to come at some point. You can try to ignore them. They can be prevented, but at some point they may come. Just knock it out, let it come, knock it out, be over with it. So when you know that end goal is that once you overcome those thoughts, it allows you to develop that peace of mind in which you can finally get more within yourself to become more creative. And that's what I practice for myself. I am still trying to work on a new tight 5 set in order for me to go to these mics or I practice on different showcases. Just typically on a month, I usually just do maybe just perform once a week or once every other week. So it's about average like 4 times a month that I usually perform. And whenever I work on a new set, I kind of go over that quota just because I am trying to work on that craft, work on that material. I currently have that 5-minute set that I worked on a couple of months ago that I can still try to knock out that rep, and I can still work on and do mics with. In the meantime, still want to just sit down and write that new stuff. But it takes some time for me just to write something and then also try to go out in the public and just expose myself to a lot of strangers who are familiar with me, who want to just follow me and engage with me and interact with me or listen to this podcast. But it's also a lot of times that I have to develop some thick skin when I'm exposed to a lot of people, exposed to a lot of personalities. It takes a lot of maturing to just to develop a good balance between socializing and then staying alone. So that's pretty much what I was focusing in and out of December. If you've got a chance to listen to the previous podcast that I released on my birthday, which was December 14th, I actually released an interview that I did with legendary comedian Jimmy Schubert. I was glad to have him on the program, and there was something that he mentioned that I kind of wanted to take away. I mean, there's a lot of wise things that he mentioned, but one thing that he was talking about that I've really been reflecting on is just talking about things to be grateful for. And when he mentioned about writing 5 things to be grateful for. So that's something I've been trying to like newly focusing myself on, especially when I do a lot of my meditation walks, is just think about things that I've been grateful in my life, whether it's that day or just throughout my whole experience on this comedy journey or just my journey in life. And just think about things that I'm grateful for to make me feel more appreciative about things that I've done in my life, make me feel more confident in my goals and accomplishing my goals. And I would like to do more interviews in which having guests to come here. I'll still go ahead and do the Zoom interviews for anyone that's long distance or a little really far away. Definitely want to try to more attempts to have guests over to my home studio. I've kind of built it up so to make it more comfortable for our guests to come, and just the audio equipment is set up right that at least we can have just a proper good recording in which the guests are pretty comfortable and feeling open to discuss about any things that I'm asking them about. And I'm releasing this on January 1st of 2023 because one thing a lot of people in preparing for the new year is just setting up for your goals. So that's something that I'm going to really talk about into the body of this podcast, but just a little bit about my goals about 2023 and what really are big goals for me. But before I get into that, I want to talk about like goals that I had for 2022. There was one really big main goal that I wanted to do for 2022, and it was this podcast. I wanted to work on this podcast. I wanted to start it. I wanted to make it grow. I wanted to have the guests that I've already had in my mind to have on this program. If you've listened to the previous episodes, that this was everything that I planned before I initiated the podcast. So I was just remaining consistent with the podcast as I developed and made it grow. And I was just being consistent with my stand-up. Big goal of 2021 was actually just doing stand-up itself. So 2022 is just me actually just being consistent with it. I don't really want to rush my craft when it comes to stand-up. I really don't want to overexert myself because that's how I would probably end up getting tired of it. Because there are some days when I am tired of it just because I'm just putting a lot of effort into it with traveling, just writing new jokes, just being exposed to a lot of people. It takes a lot of toll on the body and on the mind that I need to actually get away from everybody and just stay within myself and kind of reflect on my thoughts, which allows me to get more creative on this podcast. So 2022 was the year of me setting up this and starting the Someday with Jay Barsky podcast. So as 2023 progresses, I'm going to be consistent with this podcast and stand up. And it's because of that consistency that it's now becoming so easy for me to continue with it. I've realized that stand up, as I do more and more stand up, and it's become very easy for me just because I've done it so much and just so often that it kind of just allows me to explore other things while I can still be consistent with my stand up, and it still slowly grows because I don't want to just push it and focus more just on my stand up because there's just so much avenues that I want to explore into comedy and motivational speaking. So I say this for my goal of 2023. Reason why I want to talk about this is because this is going to be an example of manifestation. I'm speaking something out to existence. I'm actually started, if you follow me on any of my socials, I've actually started posting stuff about it. I haven't actually started doing these yet, but I'm now preparing for it, making calls, making contacts in order to start initiating and engaging this activity. And what I want to start doing of 2023 is focusing more on seminars. So I'm still going to continue doing this podcast, doing consistently, doing just a monthly, whether it maybe twice, maybe I'll put like before post every once in a while, have 2 podcasts in a month, but I want to at least try to do 1 podcast a month, whether it's solo or an interview. Still doing my stand-up, at least writing some new stuff, still knocking out my reps, because that's how I get my name out there. That's how this podcast really grows, is just kind of word of mouth of me just being exposed out there when I do my stand up. People want to know more about me, want to follow me, and that's how they can just check out my socials and this podcast. But I want to focus a lot on seminars, and there's two different kind of seminars that I'm really focusing on. The first one I want to talk about is podcast seminars. I want to start doing podcasting seminars on what I call Podcasting 101. And this is for just anybody that's interested in doing their own podcast. I pretty much have the PowerPoint set up ready. I still working on the time frame for it. Maybe it'll be like an hour or two, maybe it'll be 4 hours. I'm just still trying to work on the PowerPoint, maybe doing some activity engagements with the audience to try to help them to start thinking, get the gears rolling of what they want to do for their podcast. And this is I'm kind of making it like more of a adding my mix of personality, because it's just, I don't want to make it just a boring PowerPoint, but it has to be a PowerPoint just because of all the formal information that I'm going to discuss. But it's going to add some flair into it. So I want to add stories of my podcasting experience when I started my previous podcast with iReChat, because there's some funny stories, some funny details that I want to add in there that makes it more entertaining. And it's overall, it's an educational seminar, but it people will grasp more of what I have to say with the entertainment, whether the stories I have that are interesting or just really funny. So these seminars are probably going to be both available online, and I would like to go on tour and maybe do it at different comedy clubs. I don't know, maybe different venues might be available for me to do something like this. I kind of got the inspiration from Robert Mack, a previous guest on here, when he was talking about the science of joke writing. So when I took his workshop class that he was offering it at the Palm Beach Improv in West Palm Beach. So that's kind of what I have in mind when I have these podcast seminars. I've already made the flyer for it, so you can see some of the development in it if you follow my Instagram. I've tried maybe posted on some other stuff, but the Instagram is really where I kind of want to post the journey into those seminars so people can follow it right from the beginning and kind of see that growth at some point when it starts happening, that people can see that it just didn't start automatically, that there was actually work into this, then it started all with maybe just a simple idea or posting. And then one thing that I wanted to do with the podcasting seminar, I mean, the goal is just to help people do their own podcast, help people achieve their own dreams, their own goals, whether it's just with a podcast or maybe the podcast is just a start of something that they want to do. Just kind of influence them to know that they are capable of doing anything that they want. And if podcasting is something that they think is what they want to do and they think is a difficult challenge, and once they realize that it's not as hard as it seems, it kind of just gives them the mindset that other things are not as hard as it seems and that they can influence them to achieving their someday in their lives. I really just want to do it just to help people in starting their own podcast. Hopefully, if that builds up some income, that helps fund for other things that I can start investing in, which is doing this podcast. So that's the first seminar I have in mind, and that's already what I'm starting working on. The bigger seminar that that I really want to get into, and I talked about it a little earlier before, and 2023 is just really me preparing for this type of seminar. I really don't see myself doing it until 2024, but you never know what happens. This is just day one of 2023. There's so much things that could happen throughout the year that could go beyond my imagination. My ultimate goal really to do with comedy and motivational speaking is to have motivational seminars. I've talked about it before that I would like to do motivational seminars, but more with a comedic experience in it. So this is stuff that's kind of been inspiring me, that I've been educating and watching myself, like as I stay home and just try to work on this specific craft, that I kind of just want to focus on watching more TED Talks and cleaner comedy material in order to try to mix these two and develop my own craft into it. So today's episode, I want to talk about setting goals. And I think this is important to discuss on talking about something to be released on the first beginning of the year, because your goals should act as a guidance to where you want to be in your life. An article that I read by Tony Robbins, it describes goal setting is a fundamental key to success. We need to know that we are achieving something, which is that end goal. So we explore that journey because we can see the vision of our end goal at some point. And there's a reason why I'm releasing this podcast on New Year's Day, which falls on a Sunday. I strongly believe that whatever you're going to do on this day is a reflection on what you're going to do for not only this year, but perhaps for the rest of your life. So you really need to take advantage of today. That's why this podcast is being released first thing in the morning. I keep an eye on it, my analytics every once in a while, just to make sure that things are progressing with the podcast. Just make sure statistically, if I'm doing anything right, things that I can improve. And one thing that makes me so joyous is as soon as a podcast is published, within a few hours, there's already a dozen streams of people listening to this podcast or listening to this episode. The first thing when I release these episodes, especially the solo podcasts, that people are engaged to it and inspired by it, and it grows every episode that it's released. So it just makes me more joyous when I post these podcasts, and it inspires and motivates me just to continue on with it. And I want to set a good example of things that I say, things I do, especially when I talk about things that are in my stand-up and podcasting and motivational speaking. And I say this because the day that I'm releasing this in the morning, the day that I release this episode are things that I'm going to do that not only reflect on what I'm doing for that day, but going to be reflected on for the year and for the rest of my life and what I want to continue on doing, which is pretty much every day on the regular. So this morning, as I release this podcast in the morning, not really early, in morning at some point, I'm actually joining a community cleanup. There's a community cleanup on the New Year's Day, a local cleanup that I want to join in my neighborhood. So I want to just engage in the morning, engage in some community service to help my community. I'm a big believer of act local, think global. So anything that I am doing thing to help my community is a reflection on me helping the world. So that's something that I want to do during the day, during first thing in the morning. Probably during the day, I might go to the beach, hang out, depending how the weather is. Maybe I'll just take a nice walk downtown in a certain nearby. And that evening, I want to do some comedy related stuff. I don't think I'm gonna do any writing on this day, but on New Year's Day, but there's something definitely a local show in the evening thrown by a friend of mine, so I'm gonna be joining that, which is a nice, good full day that comes full circle. Because not only do I have something in the morning that I do a cleanup, but I have something in the evening which is comedy related. I'm not performing myself, but I'm always supportive of my friends, and just to watch them perform makes me makes me get the same joy. I mean, I've had days where I've done beach cleanups or community cleanups or volunteer, and later that evening I'll just do a couple of open mics, which is a nice fulfilled day. So this is kind of like I said, New Year's Day. This is the first day of 2023. I want to make sure I do something that's a pack of everything that I love to do in that single day, because I feel like it'll reflect what I'm going to do for the rest of that year. And it's very normal for us to talk about setting goals like 2023, day one. That's when I'm going to start doing this. I'm not going to, you probably a week before New Year's Day, you just waited, like say, for example, working out is your goal. But a week before you're like, I'm not going to work out for that week because I'm going to save it for day one of 2023. If that's the case, you should start pre-planning. So just preparing your schedule, dieting, stuff like that. So preparing for day one is very important. So when day one comes, you're not caught surprise or like, oh, push it off, because this is day one of 2023. I noticed that I did not release this podcast. I usually release podcasts in the beginning of the month, maybe on the third, a few days. I don't believe I've got a chance to do first of the month but I was just so determined to release this podcast first day of the month because I want to express how much important it is to not waste that day. If you waste this day, if you waste day one of 2023 and you don't do what you actually set your goals are, you actually wasted that day. And day one of 2023 becomes day zero to you. So you need to make today count by doing what you already set your goals are. And if you haven't yet set that goals, I suggest you start doing it right now and start planning it. If you haven't even done it, if you can do it, do it. But if not, just start planning for it. So the next day, that will be day one because you treated day one already as day zero. And that will still continue on if you don't do anything about it. And when you waste that day, you waste your time. One of the most precious things that you can give to anybody besides yourself is your time. It is one of the most precious gifts that you can give. A lot of people give their time and devote time and commitment to listen to me when I do my stand up. That's why it's very important for me when I prepare for it. I don't treat my stand up or when I do my motivational speaking as just an everyday occurrence because I know that what I'm asking for people is their time, whether it's just simple 5 minutes or just a couple of minutes. I know that how precious their time is. And in order for you to realize how precious your time is, you need to reflect on things that you've accomplished. So things reflect on something that you've done in 2022, realize the importance of your time and what you spent doing. For myself, there was on last year, it was a lot of stuff that I was doing outside of comedy, just focusing on this podcast and actually planning for future stuff for motivational speaking seminars. I did focus a lot on my motivational speaking, even though I don't blast it. I don't promote it too much just because it's kind of still in the preparation phases. But one thing that was focusing on 2022 that was really early that I wouldn't say an impossible task, but a very challenging task just because I haven't seen too many people do it, was just to release content on the Apple Music and Spotify provider distributions. And especially specifically when I say that to with the motivational tracks that I have out there. It was just something I really had plans for 2022, took baby steps, just small goals that I've kind of prepared that finally it released and was promoted little sometime at the end of the summer. I think I finally posted everything around October time. But all that stuff that I had on there was things that I've had in my mind probably a couple of years in advance, but I set my goal for 2022 to release all that content. Now, in my mind, in my vision, I didn't have it in the state that that's in now. I just knew that I wanted content out there, and I'll figure it out on the way. Now, I've gotten a chance to finally reach that goal, which allows me to try to go beyond expectations and going beyond to things that I couldn't myself can't imagine me doing just because I've already done things that I didn't imagine myself doing before. And all that time, I made sure that I was committed to it. I made sure that I committed to releasing stuff like that. There was challenges that I came and barriers that kind of prevented me to go in the path that I was setting myself, but I'd still find new ways to get to that end goal because I made sure to commit myself to achieving it because I had that confidence in myself. Any goals yet? Or if you've already started planning, you've already had these goals planned. Well, since this is day one, and I say start as soon as possible. If you have that goal, do it right now. And when I say do it, doesn't mean have to necessarily stand up and spend some money depending on what is it that you have in mind. But it could be something as simple as going on your phone and doing some research. Even when my research or preparation for what I end up wanting to do doesn't always require me just to sit down or maybe be in a cafe to work on whatever I need to work on. When I do my walks on the beach, I am thinking about these goals, thinking about some distractions, thinking about some barriers, just trying to strategize how to overcome these goals in order to get to my end goal. And it can be distracting at times. I can have tunnel vision. Anyone that knows me knows that I am big on once I have an idea that I can see myself achieving, once it's in my vision, once I've developed that blueprint in my head, I immediately start getting the gears rolling for it. I start making the calls. I start start speaking into existence. And when I say that, this is just me planning it out, just me talking about it with other people, talking about my plans, trying to network, just develop that networking in order to help me achieve these goals. A lot of times I can be really distracted on my goal. I think last month, one thing that was really difficult for me, it was just balancing a good diet for me, because just getting into doing all the stand up, and then making sure I commit to these podcasts. I give myself deadlines. And now that I'm giving myself new projects to do, especially with the seminars, motivational seminar, which I'm doing more research. So I kind of treat it as doing my comedy bits, like I'm watching stand up, going to albums. Well, instead for the motivational speaking, I'm more focused on just listening to different TED Talks, motivational speaking, reading a lot of self-help books, listening to a lot of different podcasts in order to help me grow my material. So my diet kind of got impacted really bad, just because just need to watch what I eat. Sometimes it goes up and down, but it was really nice that I had Jimmy Schubert on the podcast, because he was giving me a lot of advice on just balancing meals, just preparing his meals, talking about a lot of healthy eating rituals that he does, and just help him keep in shape and stay active throughout comedy. So that really helped me out and tried to get back into a balanced diet to make smart decisions in my comedy, motivational speaking, and everything else. So there's some tips that I want to give about goal settings. And in an article that I read by the Eastern Washington University, it's important to set short and long-term goals. So they have an acronym for having SMART goals. And when I say the word SMART, it's an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So make sure your goals are specific on what you can do, something achievable that you can do. Even if it's something that doesn't seem achievable, that's what the confidence helps you. That's what the preparation helps you. That's what you help prepare for that compliance that helps leads to that confidence in order to help you achieve those goals. Anything that you've seen me do that I've accomplished, that's content that I've put out there that some people on the outside would probably think it's impossible how they can do it. I was in the same situation until I realized my potential and had the value of my time. Once you realize that, you can realize then you can do anything that you can set your mind to. So just have the specific goals, measurable. So how will you evaluate these goals? What indicators will help you to know that what you're doing is helping you achieve your goals? So you just have to have certain indicators, different things to help let you know that, okay, this is working, or maybe, okay, this isn't working. So maybe I'll try a new strategy. I can't tell you what these indicators are, only you can know. And this is kind of go back to just doing setting up smaller goals for yourself to help prepare for those bigger goals. Because once you're able to accomplish those smaller goals, it helps builds that compliance to that confidence to help you achieve those bigger goals. Realistic, which is something that's possible that you're able to do yourself. And these need to be time based. So give yourself deadlines, give yourself dates on when you want to get these goals done. These deadlines don't have to be hard deadlines. So if you don't get it done, you don't have to assume that you failed at it. You just maybe you have to push a deadline. But at least a date or a deadline makes it more achievable, that you kind of given those small goals, that it helps prepare for you to have that end goal. So I give myself deadlines on these podcasts. Like for example, for this podcast, I gave myself the deadline of January 1st to post that. But I set these goals to help motivate me. This is what helps motivate me to achieving these goals. Whether or not I'm not driven that day, or today, or any other days that I'm driven to do these solo podcasts, these deadlines help me to know that whether or not I feel like I'm up to it, I have to commit to it. So it kind of just forces it out of me to be more passionate about what I'm doing, because I have specific deadlines and then I need to commit to them. writing down your goals as a reminder is always helpful. I mentioned on the last solo podcast to have a whiteboard, to that's importance of investing in a whiteboard. It could be reminders, but also goal setting in mind. So I have a specific whiteboard where I have a lot of my podcast material that I put on there, but I've also put little specific goals that I have as a reminder of things that I want to work on at some point. But also recognize the work that you do, reward yourself for the work that you do, especially those smaller goals to help prepare for those bigger goals. Those bigger goals that you want to celebrate. But don't forget about those smaller goals. Those smaller goals is what helps drive you to get to those bigger goals. You need to reward yourself, recognize everything that you've done to help prepare for these goals, and just enjoy the journey, because that's what it's important. That's what the most important thing about when you do these goals, setting your goals, is the journey. Ultimately, in the end, if you did not achieve your goal, if you did not accomplish what you set yourself that you accomplished, at least you tried. I would say you did what many wish they could do but are afraid to. You did what many people probably insult others to do because they are afraid to do what you did. You can learn a lot just from the experience that you set yourself for the goal. Just because you haven't accomplished the goal that you set yourself for doesn't make you a failure. You've learned a lot so much from your experience of obtaining that goal that you've grown as a person that can probably help you realize that you can set up new goals that are probably go beyond the previous goals you had. So don't fret if if you at some point you don't get to the end goal that you achieved, because what you should appreciate more is the journey. The journey is so awesome. The journey is what allows you to meet new people, to realize, to reflect on yourself, to realize new things about yourself, and help you realize your potential in achieving, and that you can do anything that you can set your mind to. But it'll start with setting those goals for yourself. So don't let day one of 2023 go to waste. Use this day to do something, either plan or engage right as we speak. After you listen to this podcast, even during this, if you listen to this podcast, even take a walk and just start thinking about what you want to do for the rest of the year. If you don't have any goals yet, start planning these goals. Have your body active and think about what you need to do in order to achieve those goals. Develop those smaller goals to get to those bigger goals. Make sure these goals are smart. So just make sure they're specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. And just remember the importance of your time and what you're capable of doing with it. So that's all I want to say about goal setting. I hope you grabbed a lot. I hope you gathered a lot from that spiel of mine. And I want to get into the outro now, and I want to actually end it off with some advice, which it just consists of 3 simple words. And that simply is shake it off. Whatever last year has done to you, whatever negative impacts it has, small, big, if it's caused any fear in you to achieving your goals, if preventing you become the person that you want to become for 2023, any fear that you have in this year, anything that is dragging you down from last year. And these are words that I kind of play off in my mind every once in a while. And I developed this mindset for myself when I was in high school, when I played high school football. Not a lot to brag about. I know I don't look that big. I'm currently now, I'm like maybe 155 pounds. It's pretty, my weight is pretty much between 150, 160. But when I played in high school, I was a lot bigger. Just a little background information about me. So I've always been what some would say a nerd, or I've always sat in front of class. I've always been well read. I was always in the library, just reading a lot of books. I wasn't too much of socializing with people, but I had a lot of friends that I grew up with that were on the football team that I actually was getting into later on during high school, was doing just more focus on strengthening and conditioning, just trying to work out, just trying to build up muscle. I was just a second string safety, strong safety. I was a lot bigger. But I worked a lot. I worked out a lot with the other players, and we never won a game. We lost all our games. We were on a bad losing streak, so it was nothing to brag. Honestly, it was nothing to brag about. We never won a game, but it was about the journey. It was about the camaraderie. Our quarterback, though, our captain of our football team, was a good friend of mine that I was in that went back all the way to elementary school with. A lot of people made fun of us just because we never won a game, and even though he was our quarterback was a great player, he was really a fun guy. And one thing he always said a lot when we talked about losing all our games is at the time one song that was really popular in the radio was "Shake It Off" by Mariah Carey. So almost every game, like a pre-ritual game or like a after a game or when we were just practicing, he would always sing the chorus to that song, Shake It Off. So it's just a catchy lyric. I'm not going to sing it for you, but if you're familiar with Mariah Carey, the song, it's actually a pretty good song. So anything that you're going through, anything that happened last year that is causing that fear, that's making you scared of achieving your someday, shake it off. And if it helps, listen to that Mariah Carey song. And so it's catchy. It's a catchy song, so you can easily remember it, remember the lyrics or just the chorus, because that's the only thing that I really remember is him singing it. I know the song because it was popular. But any negativity that brought that 2022 or before that's brought to you that feels like you think that's going to drag you down, that's going to stop you from achieving your goals for 2023, shake it off. Get the gears rolling, start planning that blueprint that I've always talked about, and start making your someday happen. That's all I want to leave you with. Just remember to shake it off, shake off that negativity, shake off those bad vibes, and realize who you are and what you can do, and that 2023 is your year. That's all I want to leave you with. I appreciate you listening to this episode, especially if you're listening to this episode on January 1st, 2023. I hope you do great things in your life. I know you can do it. You know you can do it. So let's do it together. Thanks for listening to another episode of Someday with Jay Barsky, and I'll see you soon.